Learning objectives ultimately are about business. That the person who made the greatest point about this was Arie de Geus, who was the, I think, group vice president of Royal Dutch Shell from the 1950s through the late 80s. And he made the observation that learning is probably the only true sustainable competitive advantage that a company will have in the 21st century. Yet, all too often we see companies have a disconnect, if you will, between concepts of learning for learning's sake and learning as a business practice. And a great example of this was in my early days at Fort Hill Company. My partner, Cal Wick, and I were on the phone on a conference call with a leading technology company, a global 50 technology company. And on the other side of the phone were 10 or 11 people, all of whom were part of the learning process for the senior leadership. And they were getting ready to put on what was going to be slightly less than a $2 million learning program for their top 100 people. And so we were talking about the program, we were talking about how Fort Hill was going to support the program, and in maybe a fit of naivete, asked the question, what was the program designed to do? Now, as I said, top people in the room, including the Chief Learning Officer. Chief Learning Officer looks to the VP of Human Resources and Organizational Development and says, why don't you answer that question? She looks to the next person down the line and says, we'll pass that one to you. And it made its way around the room of people until it became clear they couldn't answer the question. So we have one of the top technology companies in the world. We have their senior leadership in learning and development. We have a $2 million budget, and we have no idea what we're spending it on. And at that point, my partner Cal reached over and hit the mute button on the speakerphone and said, what do you think we should do with this? And I said, Cal, I think it's probably in their interests and our interests that we try and disengage from this, because ultimately, if a program is designed without clear outcomes that are tied to the business, the program is very likely to fail. So the feeling from our standpoint was that, one, it was incumbent upon us to tell them that we thought there was a serious weakness. But it was also incumbent upon us not to engage in something where we knew from the outset that the likelihood of success was so small as to be almost vanishing. David Campbell from the Center for Creative Leadership wrote a great book, and I'm just going to use the title of the book because I think it's emblematic of the problem. And that is, if you don't know where you're going to wind up somewhere else. And ultimately, that is what happened with that program. The program was run, the program was not successful. The best takeaway, I think, for people who are in the process of designing learning programs is that they need to align themselves with the business leaders. And the business leaders need to be a part of the process of creating the overarching needs analysis that the program is going to serve. And once that's completed, and once you're clear on what the objectives are that are business objectives, then the program design process can begin in a way which is going to be meaningful to the end result. Absent that connection point, absent a clear understanding of the business needs and the outcomes that the program will deliver, then the likelihood is, as David Campbell said, you will wind up somewhere else.